Does this sound familiar? You love God, you've spent years in church, even decades. You know scripture, you pray, you serve, and you stay faithful, but you still feel quietly flat or distant on the inside. You're still doing everything you've always done. Nothing's really stopped. So why does it feel like something's missing? And when someone asks how you're doing, you say, I'm fine. Even though underneath that, you're not really fine at all. Something feels off. Not bad enough to stop. Not obvious enough to explain. Just not fine. And the hardest part is, you might not actually know why. I'm a professional Christian coach, and I work with women who love God deeply, but still find themselves exhausted, anxious, or stuck on the inside. I recognize this situation so clearly because I've lived it too. But at the time, I didn't see that anything was particularly wrong. I just thought that this is what normal feels like. There was a season in my life where, from the outside, everything looked stable. I was responsible, I was dependable, and doing what I was supposed to. But it felt like I was running on a treadmill. It felt like I was trying to reach a mountain path I could see in front of me on the screen of the treadmill, but never actually getting there. Even the way I worked reflected it. I was pushing, always trying to get things done. But the fulfillment I was striving for never seemed to arrive. Spiritually, I would have said the same thing. I believed in God, I was in scripture, and I was serving. Nothing looked obviously wrong from the outside, but underneath, something was shifting. I wasn't in crisis, I wasn't falling apart, but there was a quiet flatness in me. Even my spiritual life and service took on that same treadmill quality, cycles of pressure, delay, and urgency that never really let me rest. So inwardly, I felt dull, crowded, and strangely disconnected. I'd sit down to read scripture, and a few minutes later, I'd realize that I hadn't really taken in anything. I'd pray, but my mind would keep drifting to everything that needed to get done. I'd show up at church, smile and talk to people, and serve where I was needed, but it started to feel more like I was going through the motions. Nothing was broken, but nothing felt fully present either. And I told myself and other people, I'm fine. Looking back, that was the part I didn't understand. If nothing appeared to be obviously wrong, but something about it felt off, that was actually not fine. What I eventually began to understand is this. I'm fine can sometimes signal disconnection. Not intentional, not rebellious, not obviously sinful, but gradual. When I think back, it was like alarm bells had been going off for a long time, but because I kept ignoring them, they just became background noise. And without realizing it, I started coping by staying busy or distracting myself. Instead of slowing down and giving myself space to consider why the alarms were going off. It's what happens when you learn to function without actually being present. Functioning is easy to measure. It's visible. People can see it, and so can you. You keep showing up, you keep doing what appears to be right, and it becomes easy to assume that you really are fine. But outwardly functioning and inwardly being honest before God are not the same thing. God sees what's really going on inside, the part no one else can see, and sometimes not even you. And that's part of what makes this so dangerous. When you keep ignoring what feels off on the inside, the alarm bells become background noise. You stop noticing them. You stop questioning them. And you start calling that normal. So how do you recognize if this may be happening? There are a few subtle signs. First, things that matter start to feel mechanical. You're reading scripture, but it feels like you're just checking a box or going through the motions. You're praying, but your thoughts keep drifting. You're serving in ways that used to feel meaningful, but now they kind of feel distant. Your emotional range starts to narrow. You're not unhappy, but you're not deeply joyful either. You feel steady, but flat at the same time. There may be nothing obviously wrong with your life, but there's a dullness that keeps you from fully enjoying it. And over time, you stop asking deeper questions. You stop pausing to reflect. You don't really check in with your heart. You just move from one responsibility to the next, staying on top of things, being responsible. And you call that being fine. None of this feels dramatic, which is what makes it so easy to miss. I've seen this in women who've walked with Christ for a long time. Women who are faithful, responsible, committed. The ones everyone comes to and depends on. But somewhere along the way, they learned how to keep going without staying connected. Not because they stopped paying attention to what was happening inside, but because they stopped listening to their internal alarm bells. For me, the shift didn't start with fixing anything. It started with being honest. It started with recognizing that I was actually not fine. I could keep telling others that I'm fine, but I had to start telling myself the truth. I was not fine. Because as long as everything stayed at the surface, nothing really changed. So if this resonates with you, don't rush to fix it. Don't add more effort. Just start by noticing it. Instead of saying, I'm fine, ask yourself, what's actually going on inside of me right now? Because clarity doesn't begin with solving the problem. It begins with seeing it. He's before all things, and in him all things hold together. Colossians 1:17. If you've ever felt like something is off inside, but you don't know what it is or what it means, or you've wondered whether that struggle says something about your faith, I want you to watch this next video where I talk about why mental and emotional struggles don't mean you're falling behind in your faith. When Christ is truly at the center, everything else finally finds its place in Him.